In April of this year, SpaceX fans had reason to celebrate. NASA made a decision, against the expectations of many observers, to select one provider for the human landing system to return mankind to the moon, and this selection was Lunar Starship. It appeared that SpaceX was going to be selected to return human beings to the moon in conjunction with SLS and the Orion capsule. This was an amazing development, a development that would put SpaceX into the history books forever. But ever since then, things have gotten a lot more complicated. As most of us know, Dynetics and Blue Origin submitted a protest to the Government Accounting Office, and after careful consideration, the GAO rejected the protest. After this, Dynetics gave up and proceeded with Appendix N of the HLS contract for a reusable and sustainable lander system, unlike the previous contract, which was just for the first 2 missions. This was a logical way for them to proceed, but Blue Origin continued to fight the original contract in federal court, and that decision is still pending. But there have been further developments. On October 18th, things got very serious indeed. The Senate Appropriations Committee released the following statement, quote, "The committee believes having at least 2 teams providing services using the gateway should be the end goal of the current development program. Using this funding, NASA is expected to ensure redundancy and competition, including robust support for research, development, testing, and evaluation for no fewer than 2 HLS teams," unquote. And do you know how much money Congress gave NASA to accomplish this? $100 million, a tiny and pathetic percentage of what NASA requires in order to support 2 competing HLS teams. And to further add to the insanity, the Senate also demanded that NASA present a plan within 30 days of the bill's passage to explain how they intend to complete the HLS program with the funds delivered. I wouldn't want to be on the team drafting that plan. Now, as many of you know, I've been arguing for a second HLS provider for quite some time. The logistical difficulties of delivering Starship to orbit and then to the moon, or rather to the gateway and then to the moon, back to the gateway and back to LEO are immense, to say the least. However, I don't want it to happen this way, because with such paltry funds, assuming NASA can even accomplish a second HLS provider at all, that HLS provider is likely to be Blue Origin. Why is this? My name is Jordan Wright. I was born in the same year that the human race took its first steps on the surface of another world, and then we promptly betrayed those people's legacy by never going back. But now, over half a century later, there's a new breed of pioneers that are seeking to finish what these people set out to do so long ago. But there is trouble as well. Corrupt contractors who are looking to take advantage of one of the most underfunded departments of the U.S. government, and an unsustainable plan that is doomed to cancellation, as the Apollo project was. Something has to change. So it's time for commentators like me to stop being polite and start getting angry. Now, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. I believe that Starship is the best vehicle by far for the human race to expand out into the solar system, and Lunar Starship is the best solution by far to set up a base on the lunar surface. Its reusability, 100% reusability, and vast cargo capacity makes it better than any of its competitors by far. However, this doesn't mean that it's the best solution for the early stages of Artemis, or indeed for any scouting mission associated with Artemis in the future. Making Starship practical for lunar missions is going to require both technology and methods that we have never used before or even attempted in low Earth orbit. The only thing we've ever done is transfer water on the ISS from a tiny little fuel depot to the ISS's water supply. That's a lot different than trying to refuel in low Earth orbit with hundreds of tons. Now, granted, I'm confident that SpaceX can do this, but refueling is something that was listed as a weakness in the Dynetics proposal, but not in the SpaceX proposal, at least not in terms of being a disqualifying problem, and this was strangely inconsistent, especially when one considers that Dynetics only needs to transfer a few dozen tons at least worth of fuel in order to be reused or used in the first place, whereas Starship is going to require over 1,000. I doubt that this would have been the case if Starship had been just as expensive a solution as Dynetics. In my opinion, NASA listed this problem on the Dynetics proposal purely for cost's sake and not because it was an actual technological drawback. On-orbit refueling is the only thing that allows Starship to deliver this huge amount of cargo virtually anywhere in the solar system, and by way of comparison, the SLS can transport 26 tons to translunar injection with no refueling, and the Block 2 version can transport 46 tons all the way to translunar injection, also without refueling. This is far more than Starship can do without refueling, and this gives SLS an advantage in spite of its massive expense and in spite of its wasteful and expendable nature. That's the sort of thing that puts Starship at a bit of a disadvantage until the whole concept of on-orbit refueling is proven. Now, just to be 100% clear, I am in no way saying that SLS is better than Starship. If we end up stuck with this rocket, then Artemis is doomed to failure. SLS is entirely too expensive and too wasteful for Congress to keep supporting it. We need something better. However, in the interim, SLS uses the same kind of solid rocket boosters that the shuttle did. It uses the same kind of fuel tank. It uses the same kind of main engines. It uses pretty much everything that we have used before, so there is really no question that this rocket will ultimately be successful. And Starship, on the other hand, represents bleeding-edge technology that has yet to be proven. So in my opinion, the Senate is right. We do need a backup HLS system in case the Starship and setting up the infrastructure necessary to make it work proves to be a lot more complicated and a lot more time-consuming than we thought. However, because NASA seems inclined to go with the old and tried and true methods of making things work as was demonstrated by the SLS, we are in serious danger of making the same mistake with the backup HLS, and this could be cataclysmic. You see, like the SLS, the National Team Lander is based off of tried and true technology. The Blue Origin descent element is based largely off of technologies developed on New Shepard. The Ascent element from Lockheed Martin is based off of technologies being used in the Orion, a vessel that's already gone to low Earth orbit and returned safely. And the transfer element by Northrop Grumman is based on the Cygnus supply ship. all tried and true technologies, and most of them non-reusable. And on top of that, as I've mentioned many times before, this lander is inherently dangerous. However, this lander has one key advantage over Starship. The descent element is designed to run off of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, which can be found in abundance on the moon, whereas Starship runs off of methalox, and thus far we have found no evidence of methane on the moon, and carbon is in extremely short supply if you want to use a saboteur method. So this particular lander does have a number of advantages in terms of its reliable technology and also in terms of its in situ propellant use. However, that's about it. Well, I take that back. This lander has one other massive advantage, and that's the fact that Blue Origin has a billionaire founder who's capable of bringing down the price substantially. And given that NASA is going to be absolutely desperate for the lowest price solution possible, that gives Blue Origin a massive edge. And the consequences of this are obvious. As you can see right here, and I've used this illustration before, linked in the description, it's just perilous, to say the least, trying to get inside of this lander or to descend from it. If you had shown Apollo astronauts this, they probably would have laughed. At the same time, they probably would have done it, but Neil Armstrong described descending just the few steps on the Apollo lander as an exercise in patience and calm. I can't imagine what it would be like for him to try to ascend or descend that ladder. And this is a comparison between the Dynetics Alpaca that I personally took in Houston and the national team's lander. You've probably seen this before as well, but the difference is colossal. Now imagine trundling about the moon in your big, bulky spacesuit and trying to get into the Dynetics lander or haul heavy cargo inside it, as opposed to trying to get inside the national team lander, which is in the background. This thing is unbelievably tall, 10 meters from the ground to the entrance. It is the tallest thing by far in the entire Johnson Space Center mock-up room. It's just impractical in so many ways and 2/3 non-reusable, which means it's going to keep burning money as Artemis continues, just like SLS, whereas the Dynetics Alpaca has now been redesigned to be 100% reusable. Granted, it didn't get a very good technological rating in Appendix N thus far, but that's because it's using cutting-edge technology that has never been used before, and that's the sort of thing that just doesn't give you a very good technological rating until you've proven the concept. Now, SpaceX seems to be an exception to this, but once again, in my opinion, that's because they came in at the lowest price and NASA was trying to justify their decision. What does all of this mean? Well, it means that Dynetics may be already out of the hunt, even though they received the largest amount of money under Appendix N to develop their project. That amount of money demonstrates that NASA actually has a lot of confidence in Alpaca. They want Alpaca to work because they want a 100% reusable solution. But at the same time, Blue Origin is going to be able to deliver a more conservative solution for a lower price, which, thanks to the Senate, is going to quite probably win out. But what's the big deal, you may ask? I mean, Blue Origin develops at the speed of about a river of liquid but at the same time, that's not necessarily the issue. The issue is that you have to be a company with a billionaire founder if you're going to have a chance of winning these kinds of contracts in the future. Underfunding HLS to this kind of insane degree sets the kind of precedent that really no government should be setting. The whole idea that innovation is going to be restricted to companies that have incredibly wealthy founders, and if you don't have those kinds of founders, you may as well not even put a proposal on NASA's desk, because innovation costs money. New technology costs money. Unless we're going to be stuck in the past forever, we need new ideas, new concepts, and these can't come exclusively from companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin. They have to come from other organizations as well that might not have these kinds of deep pockets. This is what NASA is supposed to do: return to the moon in the most innovative and efficient way possible and foot the bill themselves. That's what NASA and the government has a responsibility to accomplish if we're going to go back to the moon to stay. And SpaceX certainly fits that bill, but Blue Origin does not. What they are essentially doing is creating a bigger and more dangerous replica of the Apollo lander. That is simply not worthy of NASA's kind of reputation and heritage this long after our first landing on the moon. We should be embracing something new, something different, something innovative, and we have with Lunar Starship, and we will not if we go with Blue Origin. But thanks to the Senate, we may have to, and this is very dangerous indeed. Not only for the reasons that I've just described, but also what happens if Blue Origin ends up completing their lander first. It's not beyond the realm of possibility, because Starship needs to perfect not only a lunar landing solution, but also the method and infrastructure necessary to get Lunar Starship to the moon in the first place, whereas the Blue Origin solution can be delivered with existing rockets or rockets that will exist as early as next year. So really, getting their solution to the moon will be very simple. It's just a matter of landing on the moon. Also, in my opinion, Jeff Bezos will put whatever money and expertise that is necessary into his solution to be the man who returns humanity to the moon for the first time in over half a century. The problem is, his solution is not reusable. It's going to cost an insane amount of money in the long run as we visit the moon time and again. So with the costs of SLS and his lander piling up, how long will Congress support this endeavor? Long enough to build a base like you're looking at right now, 3D printed by the ESA? I kind of doubt it. I think we'll return to the moon a few times, and then Congress will pull the plug. It is absolutely vital that we get a reusable solution behind Artemis if this project is to succeed. It doesn't matter how much it costs on the front end, because on the back end, a non-reusable solution is going to be expensive and unsustainable. In a time when we're debating using trillions of dollars to rebuild our infrastructure, a thing that I find to be quite worthy, by the way, it is absolutely absurd for Congress to be so tight-fisted about our return to the moon. Because if Artemis fails, make no mistake, the People's Republic of China will succeed, and the consequences of them having exclusive rights to the moon have been described in a number of my videos linked in the description. It's not a future that we want to face. So, the government needs to get their heads out of their collective and realize that you cannot go back to the moon on the cheap. Do you know how much it costs to develop and procure the F-35 air superiority fighter? $323 billion, more than 10 times the entire annual budget of NASA. more than 10 times for one fighter, and yet somehow these idiots think that you can develop a way to land on the moon for less than 20 billion. Indeed, perhaps even less than 10. I'd ask these people what they've been smoking, but that would be an insult to people who smoke substances around the world, so I won't do it. But come on, what really do these people expect? Certainly not success with this kind of funding. So call your congressman, call your senator, let them know that you care about space, that space needs to be invested in, that it's at least as important as any other government program. And the current movements to try to stop space exploration in favor of solving our problems on Earth, as I addressed in my previous video, that's a load of nonsense, and we need to push forward with Artemis and invest in it. Otherwise, it is doomed to failure. If you like what I have to say, please support me. My Patreon subscribers have been dropping off as of late, perhaps because I haven't been putting out as good of content, not certain, but regardless of the reasons, if you want to see content like this continue, you know how to support me. It's all in the description, and if you can't do it financially, I quite understand. A like and subscribe would be very much appreciated as well. So until the Senate comes to the realization that landing on the moon is neither easy nor cheap, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.